Hello and welcome back to the Day 9 Daily. It's part 2 of Daily 558, where we're learning why Goswser is a better gamer. Really interesting opening we talked about in part 1. This swift sprint up to Spire Tech, where I just had to take a moment to appreciate the exact 1,000 distribution in the resources, the exact 10 larvae that would be out at the time, and the fact that we were at 65 of 100 to have plenty of supply, not just for that first round of Mutalisk, but the follow-up round of drone production. So good. Now that we're in part 2, I want to just briefly note what the situation we are at is. We see HasuObs going for quite a heavy favoring of Phoenixes. We see the air weapons, we see more Phoenixes than usual being produced, and a lot of that is because they have range 5 and are a lot stronger than they were in Wings of Liberty. But most of all, I'm loving the 16 drone just sudden explosion because we see these air units and a transition into Hydralisks, abandoning the Spire altogether. Also, a little bit skimping on the queen count right now. We're at 3 queens. We do need to spread that creep as fast as possible. Or as I like to call it, AFAP. Huh. What about an A-move FAP, Day 9? So we're seeing all the terrifying results of the Phoenix pressure, why it's so good. Spore crawlers going down, but not in excess of spores. Hydralisk speed, of course, over Hydralisk range. Why is that? Because we are trying to get in position to deal with these swift, fast air units. And Goswser just gets out some Hydras at first, and then goes back to droning. Now, in terms of all the pieces we need, we would love a macro hatch, or I should say we would love an extra hatch. But when we have just 3, obviously we want to get up to that money 75 drone count, but when we're on a low number of hatches, we want to just spend it on fairly expensive units. The Hydralisk is an expensive unit, 150 supply, especially when compared to a Roach that is 75, 25. Quite a bit cheaper. So Goswser is just going to do the smart thing and flood Hydralisk to get a little bit of space control to shut down this Phoenixing. Phoenix is quite strong against Hydralisks, weirdly enough, but you have to have enough of them. So Goswser's doing the smart thing, just spotting for third bases as best he can. All that goody goodness. Now, I want to note a little bit about, again, the possibilities, doink, as we freeze at the 1130 mark. Obviously, getting drones here is intelligent because we're not seeing just some Phoenixes, we're seeing a lot of Phoenixes. So a lot of Phoenixes basically means that he really can't have a big army. And in fact, going to the unit tab, we see he has, yeah, not a big army. Here is the Protoss army. It's the whole thing. And in fact, the number of gateways is quite small as well. I mean, Hasu is adding on more. He is trying to tech up, to get the Colossus and this sort of thing. But the more techie stuff you see, the less big army that he has. So in this circumstance, we have some interesting choices that we can make. We haven't seen a third. In my eyes, there are 2 broad choices that we can go for. One of them is to just expand. The other one is to go for swarm hosts. Now, both of these need to come from the same logical standpoint. And yeah, screw it, I will beat the dead horse. They have to come from the exact same logical standpoint because we're in this situation. You don't want to have 3 different logics for one of 3 different choices because that wouldn't make any sense. Let me give an analogy because that might not be clear. It's like if you're saying, hey, let's go to a nearby restaurant. You just look, no, fuck it, I'm not going to do the analogy. Right? So the broad statement is he doesn't have a big army and won't for a while. whatever choice we make has to be based upon that statement. We can't say something like, oh, he's going to be low on defense, so I'm going to make this attack. Or, oh, I'm pretty sure he'll tech to Colossus, so I want to beat him to that transition. So here's an alternative strategy I could do. All the strategies that we do, or all the strategies that we could do, should all start at the same spot with the simple statement, he doesn't have a lot of ground units. So if he doesn't have a lot of ground units, we can take a 4th base, and there's not much he can do because he has Phoenixes. Cool. We could go for Swarm Hosts because he can't kill us while we're getting him because he doesn't have a lot of ground units. Yeah! And then we can perform an attack against him. And he's unlikely to have the ground units to be able to deal with it because he doesn't have a lot of ground units. I like emphasizing that point because I have heard many folks before say things like, well, I want to get up a 3rd base, I want to get up a 4th base because I want to have enough gas for late game. Or I was thinking that I could just put a push on him now because he probably doesn't have any units. And I'm like, holy shit, those are 2 totally different, crazy thoughts, right? Just there's only one thing that can be going on right now, so we have to deal with that one thing right now. And of course, if you want to make the statement, I really want to get up a lot of bases for late game. That is not immediately relevant. The question is, do we take a 4th? Do we take a infestation pit? Do we mount an attack? And all that is based upon the simple statement, he doesn't have a lot of units right now. So, Goswser user could very well go for Swarm Host. I think that's an excellent choice. It's increasingly kind of a rad choice. But instead, we're seeing the 4th base. Okay, cool. Makes total sense. We listed off some of the other options we could do. And here is the new school transition that's making me be like, oh, yes. Oh, yes. And I see the live chat talking about a GIF that they're going to make of me in the previous segment. And I eagerly await said GIF because I totally knew what I did after I did it. So this is kind of a backwards transition. Ordinarily, Zerg players open Roach and then add in the Hydralisk after the fact. Here we're opening with the Hydralisk and we're adding in the Roaches after the fact. We're getting a really fast hive. This is very common, a situation where we would be thinking, oh my gosh, I need to get up my Greater Spire. I need to get the Greater Spire up to deal all the damages. To do all the pain bringing, to do all the hurt bearing, to do all the face punching. All those things. Still seeing a lot of air units, so at this point we can sort of just state, unless he's awful, he has a 3rd base. And HasuObs, not an awful player. But here's the cool thing that I'm really excited about. Right now, in Wings of Liberty, Zergs are sterile from about 14 to 17 minutes. Very, very sterile. They're screw it. Let's use all sorts of adjectives that are related to a male reproductive tract. He's a very sterile Zerg. There's really only flaccid aggression that can be executed. The Zerg is fairly impotent in terms of maneuvering at this point in the game. So he can't do anything, right? He doesn't have his Broodlords! He's massing Festers and Spines and chilling, but he can't do anything. From 14 to 17 minutes. Viper changes that. Yes! Viper changes all these things and provides another way to transition to Broodlords. I mean, Ling Infester, or Roach Infester in the mid-game, still is a fine stepping stone. It's not, you know, suddenly terrible. But I love this. I think this is nifty. Massing up this Roach Hydra. And now we have this mobile army. We have this hyper-mobile army. We even have some Corruptors in there that eventually we're going to want to turn into them Broodlords. But we can easily take all these expansions. We don't have to burn a bunch of money on spine crawlers. Imagine if all the way back here, all the way back at this 9-minute mark, when we originally decided to go Hydralisk from the get-go, imagine if instead we had gone Infestors. It would be really hard at this moment, at 16 minutes, to plant down a bunch of spines. to plant down a bunch of spines like that. I mean, we only just have 77 drones right now. It would be extremely hard to get those up. So instead of Infestor Broodlord, we now have Hydra Roach Viper Broodlord. Much more mobile. Much more awesome. And now Goswser does just these sort of Dark Templar fend-off type moves to be content. Now, what's different about this composition than our Infestor Broodlord composition? Well, we have much more leisure to take additional hatcheries, to take additional bases. We don't have the slow Infestors, the slow Broodlords, and the even slower Spine Crawlers that we have to worry about. This is actually quite a mobile army, especially with the Hydra Roach Force. So just poking up and denying the fourth. Not going for the third base, but for shutting down the fourth base. Because we want to be on 5 bases versus 3 bases, just by shutting this down. So upon the killing of this, we might press some, but not lots. So I'll also just note a couple things. The creep spread is kind of poaching to the top side a little bit, which is good because it connects this base, our newer bases together. It's also more likely that Protoss is going to push from here on up because it is connected to his own natural expansion. This is very expected as a fourth. Oh, roommates came in, shutting the door. Alright. Goddamn chatty roommates. So now we're actually going to get a chance to see kind of how these armies will end up functioning at a sort of literal level. For every Templar that we see, that is going to be 1 fewer Colossus that is actually physically possible. We only see 3 Colossus right here. So that means that the Broodlords, Broodlings, are going to be stronger, but our general ground mix will be slightly weaker, because we can get, you know, feedbacked. We're also seeing why the Phoenix opening has some potential use to it. Because our Phoenixes can actually sweep around to this side. Now this is, I think, one of the most important things coming up for Zerg. I have a question for you guys. Okay. This might be a bit douchey to ask, but I'll ask it anyways. If we're going Infestor Broodlord, and we start to lose our Infestors and Broodlords, what do we rebuild in Wings of Liberty? What do we generally rebuild? One of 2 things. Only roaches, or more Infestors and Broodlords, okay, right? Like, we either go, oh crap, I'm gonna die, let me get the roaches up so I don't die. Or we're like, well that didn't work, let me just try again with more Infestor Broodlords. That's about it. Let me blow your mind by telling you what is clever about Goswser. This is awesome. Screw that, I'm not gonna take credit for it, let Goswser blow your mind. We focused on roaches and hydras as a nice strong composition to pair with these Broodlords. Especially the hydras on the ground, eating up all the units that would possibly try to get under the Broodlords. Because we opened with this, we can take expansions like this. So if we do replenish with Roach Hydra, we are 5 base Roach Hydra, rocking it on 3 base Protoss. If we were, in Wings of Liberty, going Infestor Broodlord, it would be very hard for us to have taken so many expansions in this fashion this quickly. And attack at the same time. We could take 5 bases and sit on our asses like we do on Daybreak. But in Wings of Liberty, when you're generally replenishing roaches, it's a, oh my god, I hope I don't die, and you'll almost always be on 4 bases. Maybe even 3 at that point in time. Maybe starting a 5th base, but it'll be very, very unsafe. But here, this is just such a clever thing. Our expansions coordinate properly with this build order. We can take this. Hell, we could even take another one here or another base here. And in this engagement, even though HasuObs just frickin' rocks it, and even though my volume is getting so damn loud and it's driving me insane, even though he rocks it hard here, Goswser does have 38 larvae, 39 larvae in the back. He has battered HasuObs down quite a bit. And in fact, in the Units Lost tab, Goswser has a lot more lost, but has a 5th base up, is locked his opponent down to 3 bases of Protoss, and can rebuild an aggressive, exact composition that's mobile. Cool. So normally, Infestor Broodlord follows up by being super slow and super duper weak after you've lost your big force. And in fact, you wouldn't have even been able to deny this base. But now, Goswser can easily snap back with a more mobile force. Still monitoring for 5th bases, since this is clearly the 4th. And here's his big force, packing on up. And within a few minutes, Goswser can actually just go for another repush. So that attack, despite this, was actually reasonably successful. Because we shut this down, and we forced a Protoss to be passive. And look at this, we're taking more bases. This is not possible with Broodlord Infestor. Broodlord Infestor could not have done this attack, because there's no way Broodlord Infestor could possibly repump itself to defend this, and then even have the speed to be able to take this. All just nice coordinations. In fact, in the Army Value tab, it's not one of these 10k armies that we see out of Broodlord Infestor. And by the way, let me guess, the sound is okay again, right? All them mass expandings. Let me actually see if the sound's better. I have no idea why this is so dang loud. Unbelievable. Drives me bonkers. Let's just keep it a solid 4%. I should really write a bug report to that Badizada. So this is what I'm really loving about this idea of Roach Hydra Broodlord instead of Roach Hydra Infestor. Sure, Broodlords are just amazing units, but we're having as the underbelly to it a really mobile force. And look at us, easily able to step out, sprint into the middle. Simple defenses, not these mass spine crawler defenses. And now a rounding out of the composition. Why is this a critical thing to round out to? Well, because we have spread out base construction. We really do need more mobile units, like Ultralisks, to be able to hold down. So okay, even though this is looking really good, we still need to note what can he be doing. Standard Protoss army, I think we are all familiar with that. He can also be going Void Rays, he can be going Tempests. Thus far, we've actually seen almost nothing in regards to infestors. We've actually seen 0 infestor production. A sort of cunning move from Protoss. DTs, because HasuObs is really amazing at that, but, you know, DT's been hitting everywhere. Goswser been crunching everything. So, this is another one of these moments where, this is one of the things where I was a little bit like, I'm not so sure how much I feel about that. I actually am not the biggest fan of moving down here with this army. I think that this is still our key point, because if we're pushing through this vein, we're covering 2 of our more important expansions. By moving here, we're really only covering this expansion, which I guess does have more drones, but they're not too terribly different, because we've essentially guaranteed that Protoss is going to be passive given our early aggression that we've seen. And now that my sound is like basically off, I'm gonna be fiddling with this like frickin' all game long. So just some good base control. Not any sort of extreme shove-ins at this point yet. Carefully repositioning, pulling back, getting all the phoenixes. And just smart, calm pulling back. And then we're adding in the Vipers again. We could go Infestors, but Goswser has to keep it mobile. Vipers really fast. Super, super stupidly fast. So here's where things start to get crazy. They start to get crazy there. So this is, I think, another wise pullback from Goswser. Maybe could have killed this Nexus, but I don't really want to do that. I like these sort of focused positionings back to mid to cover these two more critical bases in my eyes. And doing something gentle like this. Got him. Yes. So everything that we're seeing Goswser do is just more replenishing with mobile, replenish with mobile, replenish, replenish, replenish with mobile, 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 mobile. This is again one of these brilliant HasuObs army split-offs, sending out the Immortals, a weird unit to Orphan in the middle of the map. We generally do this with Zealots, occasionally with Probe, send those in, but rarely ever with Immortals, but that's such a great decision. So now we're starting to see more of what I was saying. This is why I like pulling this back, because we can cover 1, 2, and now 3 bases. We're not as concerned about losing that individual base, because, I mean, what really is being lost here? So like I said, man, this game is frickin' sweet. Totally sweet game. And because we've seen almost exactly what his composition is, because we've been engaging a lot, we've been subtly pushing his composition down certain lanes. Starting to get ahead. No, I don't think so, Mr. Immortal. This isn't analysis at this point. That's just like totally rad. So here's where I feel like one of the potentially devastating moments of the game happens. When this push from Goswser begins moving down this way, I feel like it's very easy to, say, kill off this base that has really no value because nothing's mining from it, and then to kill off this base, which doesn't really have any value because it's already mined out. These are the threats that Goswser is imposing. Meanwhile, up here, there's a big threat of losing 1 of our critical bases, 2 of our critical bases, and 3 of our critical bases. This is quite critical for us in the long term. This is not as critical because it's getting mined out. This is a little more important, has a little bit more monies. So, you'll notice that everything I just said ignored what units were there. And it was just more of, if we're attacking along here and here and not protecting these ones, that's a bit of an issue. So this is the moment where I feel that Goswser needs a tissue, because he has an issue. So this is one of these odd situations, sort of spills out from what I honestly would call a sort of incorrect positioning of our army relative to our bases and his army. There's really only 3 things you consider when you're moving your army around, which is where his army is, where your bases are, and where his bases are. The most important one of those is, of course, where our bases are. We want to be protecting our bases. So, of course, the pain, the brutality, all the hurt-bringing going on. Goswser doing his best to keep these drones alive, but he loses a lot. Look at how much pain bringing Hasu's been doing. Look at the unit loss tab. This is how the unit loss tab should look, given that this is a fast and dirty, Roach Hydra emphasizing army. But that's fine, because we got 5 bases versus 3 bases early, and we would have liked to drill him hard and keep him low on that base count. Killing a base, but a relatively inessential base, and then following what I think is a bit of a blunder of a mid-game move to move down to those bases is a very intelligent pullback. I like this again. Retaking this expansion because our army, relative to these new bases, makes a lot of sense given that his army is all the way up here. So you can actually just see if we just draw a line. Jeez, the top right's just going nuts. Help me, we're larvae, we're dying. But yeah, now that it's kind of calmed down, we can clearly see that our army is in the way of his army. And thus comes the careful zoning. Some repopulating with Ultralists that are terrifying now. 44 damage a swing, regardless of your type. And continuing not to build Infestors, but to build the Hydralisk and the Ultralisk. Blinding Cloud, one of our biggest friends in all of this, because if we Blinding Cloud this stuff, it's almost impossible for Stalkers underneath our Broodlords to do damage, and we're keeping in that vein of mobility. By the way, I'll just note something really quick. Broodlords are slower at 1.41 than Infestors are at 2.25. Yet Broodlords are still inherently more mobile because they fly. They can fly around, they don't get stuck, they don't have pathing issues. So with some very nice Blinding Clouds and some very nice aggression, Goswser's going to break through it. However, I will ask one more simple question before break. With this expansion here, and here, and here, and, you know, with a little bit of pushing up here, given this big engagement that we're having up here, what do we replenish? Obviously, getting some of these Corruptors makes sense, because, you know, we see Tempest and Colossus. But what would we do next? When we come back in part 3, we'll talk a little bit about it. I'll see you in 3 minutes.